invites us to celebrate the good news of God's saving love. We've been learning a lot, obviously, through the pandemic. What does it mean when you close your church doors to be the body of Christ in your community? How can we serve our communities when we're in that place? What does it mean if we're going to continue with our priorities to grow in depth, influence, number and younger? These remain our priorities as we move forward, building on what Alan said as we are looking forward as well, and to the continuing transformation across our lovely county. To grow in depth, and we slightly redefined these if you notice the wording carefully. And to grow in depth means we're concentrating on prayer and worship, vibrant worship, wherever that might be in a mixed ecology of church, both parish church, established church, the way we've done church, and which many of us love for many years as we've brought up in the Book of Common Prayer, as well as new ways of doing church, but both are equally valid. How do we participate in God's loving movement towards the world? How do we witness, or if you like, proclaim the person and the character of Jesus Christ, growing in confidence to serve and to love him? And especially growing younger, how do we engage all generations? So together we shape the future of the church. These have been our priorities since back in 2014, and we're building on them ever since. We noticed the other day that actually we made some outcomes for 2022, and you've got a paper that reflects that about 2022, how we might look in 2022. So how do we look? How have we done when we set those objectives, if you like, and to now, before we start looking forward? Next slide, please. Firstly, areas we can see significant progress. We have indeed increased the number of ordinands. I know next week we've got 13, I believe, being ordained. 8 or 9 through SSN, mainly through our auxiliary ordination pathway, which has been an innovative way of drawing out more vocations in our midst. We have provided a wider range of licensed lay ministries, which build on the great work of readers and elders, but also now include youth, children, families, evangelists and pioneers, all licensed as LLMs, and we're at the forefront of that across the Church of England, and people come to us looking at how we do that. How we've continued to engage in many areas of service. I've already referenced COVID. In Ipswich we've got, I think, about 8 or 7 carols here, top-up shops, where people can go and get a bag of food with no referrals for £2 a bag. Weekly, people serving our communities. In our villages, porch pantries emerged and popped up literally in the porches. So not just in the towns, but many other areas, examples of where we've reached out to our communities. I was just checking with Gary that I'm correct. One of our targets was to increase our level of financial giving per electoral roll member. And that's partly because the number of members have gone down, but also the numbers who have remained have given even more. Those are where we can see significant progress. Next slide. There are areas, if you like, we're on the journey towards. We can see encouraging confidence in church members to live and share their faith. Again, Alan mentioned we can't measure absolutely everything. How do you measure that? But from conversation, from anecdotal evidence, from seeing people starting new things, I can sense a new confidence that I've not seen for some time amongst many people. We'll hear in a few moments from Archdeacon Sally about the number of small groups, lightweight groups, that have been experimental to reach people beyond the life of the normal life of the church, people who don't normally darken our doors. These lightweight groups, not just lightweight groups, also parish churches, just having a go. We can see the number of people who have applied to our growth fund, who want to have a go and reach out to people. And we want to be a diocese that encourages experimentation. We've re-engaged in church planting. We have Bridge Church and River Church and Lindbergh Road Community Church in Ipswich. And you can see one of those is basically a gazebo on somebody's front lawn. It doesn't cost a lot sometimes to have a go. And that can be replicated elsewhere. We've broadened our reach of church schools as they continue their great work in growing in influence, maintaining that Christian education that was spoken of about in Clare Deanery. How do we maintain that and encourage it to many people who will send their children to a church school but may not want to attend the church themselves? We've regained confidence, I believe, on addressing issues of social justice. It's great to have Guy here with us. Is our political enabler to help us to think not just about providing food through top-up shops, but asking the difficult question, why do we have them in the first place? Do we need to put pressure on in some quarters to enable us to do that? Next slide, please. And yet there are areas, if we were going to give ourselves marks out of 10, we've still got a long way to go. And these are the obvious ones. There is still a substantial, stubborn, long-term decline in attendance at our worship services. We're also not really attracting children and young people to our gathered worship services. Many examples of messy church, projects beyond actually Sunday, beyond the gathering for church, in that sense, but church in a dispersed sense, yes, we've got that, but difficult to measure. But we're not seeing a translation as yet, I don't believe, into categories we might call them worship services. Some signs, but a long way to go. And hardest of all is our numbers of baptisms and confirmations. Still not actually increasing, certainly in the way I would like to see, and what we would hope would happen. Because whether it's fresh expressions, mixed ecology, whatever language you might use, parish church, cathedral, ultimately it's about coming to that faith in Jesus Christ and declaring it publicly. That's what we're about. That's what the Christian church has been about since it was founded. And so that's what we continue to do. So there's still a long way to go. Next slide, please. How can we be simpler, bolder and humbler? Can you take it on and the next one? And the next one. Thank you. Address this slightly differently. What have we learned, if you like? Simpler, bolder and humbler is about the national church priorities moving forward. So before I launch into where we're going into the next few years, let's just take stock of those outcomes and just think of some of the lessons that we've learned. These are my personal reflections. I'm going to take them in a slightly different order than you've got them on the paper. First of all, I believe we need to aim for sustainable growth. I love the imagery we've got on some of these slides of these little pots that grow slowly. This is Suffolk, after all, bless it. You know, we don't rush in Suffolk, do we? Just that sense of let's grow sustainable growth. That's maybe why sometimes we set ourselves targets. We're maybe slightly over-ambitious, and we need just to slow it down, but make sure it's real growth. How can we be willing to experiment? We want to carry that on. Where we've seen people step forward, and sometimes it's not worked. Sally will recognise that, Rhiannon will, and many in our parishes will recognise we tried that vicar 40 years ago. And we're trying to say, have another go. There's a new day dawning. We need to think about our context. This is the main slide really in this, about even within Suffolk, there are varieties of contexts. Where I live, in the middle of Ipswich, there's something like 40 different languages spoken. I do not hear English where I live. And that ranges to very, if I call, deep rural Suffolk, bandit country, where there's families been there, thank you, where there's families who have been living there for generations. And I left Redfield, and I said to the people there, you know, at the funeral, have you got anybody coming far? I said, oh yes, they're going from Ike. So you've got that range of people literally have arrived yesterday in our area I live, from very different background, a different country, to people who have lived there generation after generation after generation. And we have to take our context seriously. So we've done a bit of work behind the scenes of what does growing in God look like in rural multi-parish benefits, which is one of the most frequent experiences of most of our clergy. Yet serving actually very small populations. Talking to one new colleague from Mid-Lowes, Gary, has just come, and I was saying, really, you'd look at the figures and think, well, you know, is it going to be a stipendiary post for that number of people, 1,700? And he said to me, yes, but our percentage of attendance compared to the population is really high. I like that. It's a different ministry, isn't it? I've served in both. And therefore, you can't have one size fits all. Even within St Ed's Nips, never mind how Alan deals with it across the whole Church of England. Pray for him and the church commissioners and everybody else. The market towns, we think coming forward, is a really quite key. We have invested strongly in Ipswich quite correctly, and that's absolutely right. And we've also invested, and Sally will say this, within our rural context, but what about the market towns, populations over 10,000, your Felixstows, your Haverhills, already been mentioned? What about your Berries? What about those places where there's lots of new housing? As you drove into Berry, you'll have seen lots of new housing popping up on the A14 corridor or all around Haverhill. How are we engaging in there? Is it going to be a Christian desert in those places? Or are we going to engage in there as well? And in the larger town, your Felixstows, your Berries, your Ipswich is continuing, we need to continue that. Well, sometimes there's real deprivation all over the county, we know that. But actually particular areas that we need to address and resource. There's a problem with having so many church buildings that it can be a great asset, is that you've then got a vicar charging around 8 parishes, and then you've got one vicar looking after 30,000 people. So how do we address that imbalance? Different ministries that need different answers. And finally, to develop local leadership. One of the things I'm most proud of is how we've seen that happen. One of the beauties of being a small diocese is that we know our people. Sometimes that's a difficulty. But we know our people. So we can draw on people's great skills, not at a great cost, and actually employ somebody maybe one day a week. Julie Daniels, an example, a children and family minister. She went through Hillary's course, Connect, you can read about it at the back, and then when they launched Lindbergh Road Church Community, they can just pay her just something. And could we not replicate that? And that's now in the plan that's going forward to Alan, that I hope he'll sign up on Thursday. I'll give him a copy now, we could do it now. That sense of actually thinking that actually right in our midst we've got the people. Next slide, please. What are resources for 2022 and 2026? Where are we going for the future? First thing I want to mention is investments in leadership. If we're going to have flourishing congregations making a difference, we need to resource our ministers, both clergy and laity, well. And so we're asking for money to support us to put on a really good leadership program, which begins in September. And the senior leadership team are going to sample it in July, and the first one's a pilot. We can only take 12 at a time, but we're committed to rolling it out to everybody over time. And the commitment is to the individual first. The people who are helping us put this together are saying, if you make those small changes in your own personal life and your walk with God, there'll be big changes that come in the way you deliver ministry. So the concentration isn't what can they do for us, is what we and God can do for those individuals. An investment in people, in time, in care and love. We're going to support you in continuing to discern your plans for growth. You remember I used to do this every 3 years. I pop around Archdeacon visitations. Every 3 years turn up with some other materials to ask you to look at the benefits. How are you going to grow in depth, number, influence and younger? We did it in 2015, we did it in 2018, and we skipped 2021 because of COVID. So Phil now, who's employed our mission enabler, is going around the visitations as I speak, doing the same things, simpler, new materials. And they're at the back if you want to see what they look like, or you haven't seen them already. Asking you to make those plans. We're offering 2 in-depth training programs. One of them you remember called Germinate, particular for rural multi-parish beneficiaries. We're now calling it Growing Rural because Arthur Mount wanted us to do that. So we're launching that where you can come together and make some plans. So you want to make your plans with other beneficiaries, to have people in the same sort of context that you're in and work together. And you can talk to colleagues who've done that before. It worked really well over an 18-month period, a shared learning journey. No experts, the only experts are you, each other. We facilitate it. And something called Partnership for Missional Church, which is a more in-depth look at a longer-term approach, a 3-year approach, taking the whole congregation through a methodology of discerning where we go. And again, information's at the back. Growing Rural, Germinate will start in September, so you can sign up today before you go. And PMC will start in January. There's a taster sessions coming up soon on Zoom for Germinate, for Growing Rural. We're going to continue to promote and support all vocations. We've got a vocations roadshow going out, which Stuart's heading up. It's DDO, when you've appointed, it's not only just got DDOing, it's got all vocations, including elders now. So we have a celebration of elders in October. We've not had one for a while. Over 490 elders who serve us so well across our county and our churches. The backbone, if you like, of our diocese. Revitalising our reader ministry to help all Christians to live out their faith in everyday life. We're going to develop, and this is really exciting, an online learning hub. If you want to see what this looks like, go to Coventry Diocese website and get the link to their online learning hub. Or if you go to something called in Sheffield called St Peter's College, well, actually in one-stop shop, you can find online materials to engage in training and discipleship, ever so easy to access. So it's not lost in a labyrinth of other avenues and other ways, or you've got to contact this officer or this person. Actually, you can access it directly. And the learning we picked up from during the pandemic and COVID, and people got a lot more savvy about working and training online. So how we can do that, which will support the in-person stuff. And we are working, rest assured, with other dioceses. This isn't a go-alone job. This is working with other dioceses. We're working in partnership. And we're really excited. That should come on stream in January, the latest estimate. We're trialling it internally. It'll come on stream in January. And I think that's a game changer. Refocus on providing funding for innovative and inspirational work with children. That sense of working with young people and their families. When we launched this in 2014, I have to say I looked around at all the dioceses in the country, and no one bar Birmingham had growing younger as a priority. I'm glad the National Church has caught up. We named it. People complain as you're being ageist. Now I know, there's some of my time I really would like to change it to growing older, because then we could achieve it every day. But probably not wise. So I'm going to stay with growing younger. And it's still the same really, is how do we match the age profile of the people that we serve? When I was licensed and you're put into an incumbency, you're given what's quaintly called the cure of souls for the whole parish. That's every generation, not just the ones who are currently actually in our churches. Love those people as much as we do, and they love their generations too. Ask them about their grandchildren and how they're going to come to faith. Because faith is important to them, staff on an emotional level. And we've got plans to how we can do that. And one of the ways we're doing that is increasing our Growing in God Growth Fund. It's great to see how the £10,000 per annum we've used to help small projects. We had applications from parish churches, village churches saying, could you help us with bags of activities for messy church families during COVID? And we funded that. Not a lot of money, but it made a big difference. I don't think it needs, Alan, close your ears, it doesn't need a huge amount. It needs innovation, innovation, and inspirational work. And so we're going to we hope to increase that money to £35,000. How are we doing all this? Well, Alan's given the game away. We've actually got the application here that Anne has been working on so hard. This is 20 slides 23 appendices in great detail. I think Anne deserves a huge appreciation for all that she's done. And do you want to give a round of applause? Don't clap too much until we hear the outcome. But we really appreciate all the work that's been done, because this isn't just about asking for money. We are asking for money because we need a bit more support. And this is not like the SDF projects, which is, there's obviously accountability. This has helped us to rethink how we bring everything together and integrate around growing in God. This is like the mature version. And I love the slide. I love the little plots. You see the little pots? I see that almost like a little symbol. Whoever did it for us, thank you, because it's almost like how we started back in 2014. There's a little pot, and there's a little seedling. And then it grows a little bit. I keep saying, my name's Gardner, but I'm not a gardener, I'm not very good. And very often things die, and we've got a bay tree outside our front door. It's the third one. I asked a friend, who's a gardener, said, what do you think is going wrong? He said, do you water it? I went, But seriously, what are the barriers? Let's look back a little bit where you are. Do what I've just done. As you do this recycling on looking at the growing in depth, number, influence, growing younger in your benefices, don't be scared to look back and say, that's worked well, that's on its way, that's not. And what we need to stop doing is not working anymore. What is it that God's calling us to as we move forward? To go in depth, number, younger, and to grow in influence. We started out with a verse from the Scriptures, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 6. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. Just where you are in pairs, if you've got just a buzz for a few minutes, what excites you about the next 5 years? And what one question you'd like to ask either me or my colleagues at the back in a few minutes' time. So just go about 2 minutes, just buzz in pairs. What excites you and what one question might you have?